Everyone here, most welcome. Thank you so much for coming in so many numbers. Um, my name is Nishith Desai, a legal advisor to what's called EMRI. It's an asset management roundtable, asset managers roundtable of India, AMRI. And Nandita is the convener and the leader of the whole group, which represents the FIs from world over, and particularly the FIs that are managed by the non-resident Indians and also resident institutions. This meeting has been specially called for, and once again, thanks a lot for coming over here, is to discuss some implications of a recent circular that has been issued by Securities and Exchange Board of India in the context of KYC norms for the institutions that are investing from abroad and also institutions that are managed, which are managed by resident Indian institutions. What has happened is, I think, contrary to a very healthy practice for which we are always grateful to SEBI, and that is usually there is consultative process, and this time this consultative process has not happened. The circular was issued to enhance the KYC requirement. KYC is know your client because of money laundering, and we are all in sync with that. But while doing that, what has happened is that they have debarred international institutions um, and the other entities that are managed by the non-resident Indians, OCI cardholders, the PIOs, and also resident Indian institutions. So today, it's a stated purpose of the government to encourage Indians and NRIs to mobilize global capital into India. The consequence, somehow or the other, whether possibly unintended, we hope, is that there will be complete ban on this kind of funds that are coming into India. Now, the most important thing we need to understand, this has a very serious implication. It seems that it is not sufficiently understood what magnitude this could have. Almost $450 billion have come in through FI route, what is now called FPI, Foreign Portfolio Investors route, of which $75 billion are mobilized by Indian financial institutions, very reputed ones, and also by NRIs who are most well known now in the world for fund management activity. 75 billion have been mobilized by those institutions. Now, all that will be disqualified suddenly one fine morning. Okay, and the date now is after 31st of December. Uh, you know, it was, I think, happening on 1st of October, but now it will from 1st of January. If this circular is not amended appropriately, suddenly at least $75 billion will be at one go, will be stopped and disqualified. So it seems that this may be somewhat unintended. Government may have a good intention of curbing money laundering and other kind of stuff, but in the whole process, the way in which it is done, it seems that caused a lot of problem. It has become an existential issue for all the NRI fund managers and also for the Indian resident institutions. We have most reputed. Government itself encouraged. They said global fund management industry should come to India or be managed by Indians. And now that has happened, suddenly this has become a bit of a problem. And this is to be very well understood. Nobody has absolutely any question on enhancing KYC norms, complying with the rules, regulations, etc. But banning and considering all the NRIs and resident institutions as a conduit for money laundering, it seems that is going a bit too far, and that's what is the there's some need for corrective action. We hope government will understand that and do the needful. Uh, I would suggest Nandita to tell you a little more. Already we had meeting with SEBI chairman, Mr. Tyagi, very good meeting, and possibly as initiative process for consultative process as well. But we do not know as yet. We do not know. But in any case, it is very important to see that this particular situation doesn't lead to a system where just to do KYC, we stop the huge inflow of foreign capital into India. And the need for foreign capital, we don't need to restate. Okay. It can also lead to the market repercussions. Like if you see 75 billion plus, there will be others because of other clauses that are there in the circular. About 100 billion, 150 billion can be withdrawn from Indian markets, including the investment and the huge investment that has come into mutual funds into India. Mutual funds have also mobilized a lot of funds. So those are some of the things that we thought we'll be discussing with you. And so repercussions are very high. So this issue cannot be put aside. And it's important that together with EMRI, the Asset Managers Roundtable of India, which is an association of all these FIs and FPIs, and in consultation with government, we come to a system where we mobilize good capital. There will always be bad actors. We have to take action against those, but we cannot brush every NRI, every resident institutions with a broad brush that everybody is indulging conduit or bringing some kind of. This is the main crux of the whole problem. Also, circular has a lot of ambiguity in it and language and wording and all that we need to refine. We would have really been delighted if there could have been a previous draft consultation. So, next step that we would at least like to see is that the next draft of the amended circular, if government, hopefully after listening to us, will issue, will be also in the draft form. So all of us, including us as well as press and everybody, can react to that, so that whatever we bring out is clear, unambiguous, and facilitative of foreign investment. And this is the starting point. And Nandita will tell you about a presentation to the Chairman SEBI. And Nandita, why don't you go for?
Sure. So, a couple of things I wanted to highlight to you is we have had a very good discussion with SEBI chairman, where we have presented our questions for him, basically asking, why was this put out in the first place? And so we're asking for his intervention, and I can read out some of the points from this letter that we're asking. So one, as Nishith Bhai said, this circular was issued without any prior consultation with the stakeholders. And even now, I'd like to point out that the HR Khan committee doesn't have any asset managers on the committee. And so we're really not there in the picture. So we at AMRI are an organization that represents the FPI community, which has invested over $450 billion in India, out of which $75 billion is managed by OCIs, PIOs, NRIs, and approved regulated resident Indian institutions. We have been ambassadors of India's economic growth and advocates of India's investment potential for the past 3 decades. I personally have done that since 1994, and I feel that we're being very unfairly discriminated against by this circular. And actually, on the sidebar, I can't believe that it's true. I mean, I'm still in shock about it. I don't think any country in the world discriminates against its own people. And the effect of this circular is exactly that, it's racial discrimination. So, as Nishith Bhai says, the immediate impact of the circular is that if the existing FPIs are not in compliance with the stipulations, $75 billion managed by these OCIs, PIOs, NRIs, RIs will have to be disqualified and liquidated. So I don't need to tell you all what kind of a market reaction that would mean and what that would mean for the Indian currency. Let's recall that when $20 billion was the outflow in 2008, what kind of a crash that caused both for the markets in equities as well as the currency. So it's also pertinent to note that the circular is vague, opaque, and confusing for the market to understand. It basically distrusts NRIs and resident institutional community and presumes without any basis whatsoever that all of them do not pass the KYC tests. The Government of India has previously taken numerous steps to encourage resident institutions and NRIs to mobilize FPI investments. And now, suddenly and without warning, this circular has practically put a blanket ban on these investments. And let me also add here that our Prime Minister himself has reached out and galvanized the NRI community abroad, that 35 million of the diaspora that he has reached out to personally. And I find it shocking. And that's why we're raising the decibel points here in reaching out to the highest office in this land, to say that, please hear us, because maybe different parts of the government are not talking to each other and not understanding the enormity of what this tiny little circular means. Further, in conjunction with SEBI circular dated 2010, the circular delegates regulatory discretionary powers relating to defining high-risk jurisdictions to foreign banks and custodians, as a result of which different banks have different defining jurisdictions as high risk, and thus unable to impose investment restrictions themselves without review. So some banks have even classified India as high-risk jurisdiction. I think this is something that maybe the ministry is not aware of. So what we're saying is we're here to cooperate and help the government to form appropriate policy to promote a very healthy ecosystem for global investments in India. And we're here to work with you. We issue the SEBI's press release of August 21st, extending the date of compliance of the circular to August 31st, but
31st.
December 31st. But we also are alarmed that this time actually puts the industry in limbo for an extended period of time, and we really need answers now. We'd like a consultation right away with the ministry and with the committee, and we'd like this circular to be scrapped, because really this is ugly, and this is not the face of India we'd like to put forth in the world. We're having a tough time explaining to our institutional investors why India is doing this. In fact, there is no checkbox form in any form, a KYC form that says NRI PIO. Okay, a person of Indian origin cannot be discriminated against, and it flouts all privacy laws in the US and Europe. So with that,
Just to explain this point, sorry for interruption, is that when there are global funds, okay, the global funds say in the US, when you fill up a form, you cannot ask what is your race. Okay, now the implication of the circular is that they will have to collect that information. But law they cannot, because if somebody say, are you a Jew? Are you Muslim? Are you this? You cannot ask that kind of question globally, So the implication of this, if NRIs have to implement this, they have to ask these questions. Or even let's say in Indian institutions, when they mobilize funds, they cannot ask this question, what is your race? So some of these global issues are not perhaps fully understood, and that is why we are trying to say that it is better to understand implications are wide and varied, and yeah.
If I may just ask a question to you, Monica, and to you, sir. I think the question is really going to be on thresholds, because what they're saying right now is, according to the circular, that if the structure is a trust structure, then beneficial ownership is defined as 15%. I mean, anyone owning more than 15%. I think for companies, a company structure is 25%. If it's a high risk jurisdiction, it's 10%. So I guess there will be a lot of discussion and conversation around what is the right threshold. So some of the counters that I've been hearing since the last few months, actually, since we've been following this up, is that isn't it fair to say that an NRI or a person of Indian origin can manage these funds as long as no single NRI holds more than 15%? So is the 15% threshold too low? Is that what you're saying? A little more on the threshold.
Sure. I think what you're talking about was the classical position when you look at economic ownership. Unfortunately, the circular has changed the threshold to beneficial ownership, which has a slightly wider color than economic ownership. So apart from the thresholds of 25, 15, 10 that you spoke about, beneficial ownership also means who's controlling the structure and also who's a senior management officer. In fact, that was the other discussion that this entire circular brought about. That I can look at the economic ownership from an investor perspective. And again, the issues that Nishith said, like, are you a person of Indian origin? Do you have to ask you in some KYC form, etc. The other issue that the large part of the industry is grappling with is that if you're curbing NRIs from being managers of FPIs, because beneficial ownership also means managing a fund, are you saying that NRIs are not good gatekeepers from a KYC perspective when they're managing these funds?
But I think the
So this
issue
is
of
not.
management comes up only when a beneficial owner cannot be sort of arrived at or recognized going by those thresholds. I mean, I'm just quoting the
No,
circular.
That's not correct.
This is interestingly, this has no threshold. As soon as it is managed by NRI or
Okay.
senior management official, is NRI or automatically that is deemed ownership.
In fact,
Irrespective of
clarify
the
the point.
economic
Yeah, so there are
interest.
3 parallel verticals now on this KYC format. They're saying that identifies the beneficial owners on the basis of economic ownership. Whether you have someone or not doesn't matter. Identify beneficial owners on the basis of management and control. And third is on senior management officers. So all 3 of them are parallel threads that have to be sort of carried out.
Nishith bhai, this circular has been hanging fire for the last 5 months now.
Correct.
It's abundantly clear that it is not a drafting error. The government and the regulator wants it. You people have made repeated representations, custodians and so on.
Yeah.
And now you are calling a press conference and using fairly strong words. So you are almost giving up that the government is about to relax or take a relook. So why do you think they are going after it so strong?
Well, obviously there is a concern that there is some kind of money laundering happening. See, these are the questions we have really asked. That please tell us the objective. So, in fact, in addition, she will read out to you. We have given questions to the committee. That these are the. If you can respond to this question, we are also in a better position to do it. So today we have to speculate why government has done this and why it is it is issued under KYC norm, but it has gone to impose restrictions on investment, which is a pharma issue and not a KYC issue. So so this is why the confusion. So we say that we would like to be consulted. Number one, if you want to be consulted, we also want to know what is the objective for which you have brought in this regulation. Then we can help you to achieve the objective. But the objective plus how all that has been done. So she will read out to you the questions.
No, but did you get a sense in the course of your meetings that the regulator is helpless here and the directive is coming from the government?
Yes and no. I would say that there is a fair degree of ambiguity there. It seems that they really want to come up with a solution. There could be some backtracking possible, but I don't think this is actually a very strong mandate as such from the ministry.
I have a question. Ashwin here from ET now. You spoke about the fact that $75 billion stands at risk if this becomes effective post January 1st, 2018. But that is only and only if the FPIs or their managers are reluctant to disclose what this semi-circular requires you to disclose. So, my question being, what is the reluctance to comply with the requirements? Why are they so harsh and onerous?
I think I'll just take one more point. There are 2 different points. One is a KYC disclosure, and another is a restriction. So the fact that the circular starts with a very innocuous subject line that clarifications on KYC, that's a disclosure item. That's fine. But the circular goes on to say that these structures which has NRIs or PIOs or Indian residents as beneficial, they are banned. So they are restricted henceforth from accessing markets. They did it to FNO, futures and options segment of the market in May. They said you can't roll over your positions. So they were completely wiped out from participation.
So when you mean these
So let
structures,
me-
are there any alternative structures that perhaps you are comfortable with?
Not
First
that
we
they're
need to-
aware of.
What I'm telling is that there are 2 parts, and be very candid about it. Absolutely, there is no objections to disclosure of beneficial ownership. Please note that there is absolutely no objection to. The question is, how do you define beneficial ownership? One, by economic ownership. If somebody has invested, yeah, we are fine to do that. Only problem is that there are global funds which are globally invested. In that, what happens in the form, suppose XYZ, whichever fidelity or whatever, when they mobilize global investment, they cannot ask to tick mark somebody, are you an NRI? So those kind of funds cannot be tracked straight away because if it's a huge fund in the US, for example, part of the monies are invested in India. When they ask for investor, they cannot ask what is your race? Are you NRI? Are you Jew? Are you Muslim? Are you this? So those things are impossible to do it. Number one. So beneficial ownership, we are again saying there is absolutely no objection to the ownership criteria. But second point is how do you define ownership? Ownership is defined not only as actual economic ownership, somebody has put money, but if you are controlled, okay, that is also your ownership. So if NRI managed a fund, if you are, because NRI they control the, right, that itself is deemed ownership. Third point of ownership is that if your senior management officer is also an NRI or resident Indian person who is promoted approved by government, okay, not just like that, he is also deemed to be owner. So question is that because of this ownership, the way in which it is defined, it leads to an impression that NRIs don't want to disclose, but that's absolutely untrue.
So there's no problem with the extent of disclosure that is required.
Absolutely not.
The problem is with the restrictions on
Restrictions, and those restrictions should be coming under FEMA, right? Now under the KYC PMLA law, you have brought this restriction, and that is what is causing this whole confusion.
In a meeting with the SEBI chairman, was there any optimism regarding them diluting or?
Well, I think the optimism definitely to the extent that they said that he would take up the issue with the Khan committee so that we are engaged in the discussion. We suggested obviously he was extremely, I would say, welcoming, and possibly they had not understood. They said industry is represented because there are custodians, but the custodians are slightly different from the actual industry. This industry is a global issue. So what are these problems of collecting information? So custodians are doing their job, but there is no representation of asset managers in the. So nobody is there to explain to the Khan committee as to. So I think he was very receptive, and I think he was understanding. Of course, now we do not know the reason why this meeting is held is because time has become a bit of an urgency because next 3 months you have to wind up. Correct? It's a big problem.
You spoke about violation of global privacy laws.
Because of this racial information you cannot ask, no? It becomes privacy.
I cannot have a form for my investors asking their race.
So this is unprecedented, you're saying? Nowhere in the globe is such information sought by any jurisdiction?
At least in the civilized jurisdictions.
So see, I think
what's really alarming is that if you are a Nigerian, you can set up a fund.
You can do the same thing.
Okay, if you're a Russian, you can do it. Okay, only if you're a PIO, a person of Indian origin, which means that you are a foreign passport holder, but your grandfather may have been an Indian, you might be an Indian, your great-grandfather there might have been 10% Indian in you, so you are a PIO, you can't start and launch a fund. I mean, it's absurd.
Just to quickly reiterate the point you're making, this is irrespective of the amount
Correct.
of economic interest this individual is holding in the fund.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That causes problems.
See, I think custodians can only ask for KYC documents. They can ask you what's the passport you're holding, where you're filing tax returns. A passport can tell you whether you are Indian citizen or not. A tax return can tell you where are you resident of. Now, how do you figure out if a person is of Indian origin? You're asking 2-3 generations up, right? So it's literally a question of a questionnaire that you ask them to tick a box. Like Nishith indicated, check the box that are you of an Indian origin or not? Because that's not a KYC pickup item at all.
But is there also a reluctance to disclose the ultimate beneficial owner, where you have to go back to the last natural person?
No, not in that. That's not what the issue.
If we have the information, there is no problem.
Yeah.
But you cannot ask this question to the global funds.
Yeah.
That's the problem. See,
If
again, just to repeat, absolutely no hesitation in sharing information about beneficial ownership.
Of the fund
So
manager,
long as you
yes.
consider ownership in the true sense of the word. But if you attribute ownership as a control is also ownership, if you define it that way, that becomes little tricky.
But there could be many foreign closely held entities who invest, and they may not be willing to disclose the last natural person who controls the entities. But there could be a natural reluctance not to disclose.
No, see,
That
the
I'm not
KYC,
interested in managing.
see, the KYC rules are very clear. Even at the time of application, when you want to get onboarded as an FPI, you formally are required to give a lot of representations, declarations, and disclosure. If you're not willing to share, you automatically become ineligible to get the license, right? So I think that threshold has to be crossed by everyone.
So again, just to come back to, I mean, this point number 6 of, how they're saying how you need to first of all disclose who's the beneficial owner. And then that's where these thresholds come in, and it goes on to say that where no material shareholder owner entity is identified in the FPI using the materiality threshold referred above for controlling ownership interest basis and also on control basis, BO shall be the senior managing official
Right.
or the FPI.
Right.
But this is only in cases where the BO has not been established as per the thresholds, not in other cases, right?
So let me put it this way. Like I said, there are 3 separate verticals.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the economic ownership, the percentages have been given. Then you look at control aspect, that also has to be separately be given.
So what is the definition, what is the interpretation as per, I mean, how you read the circular, the definition of controlling interest in a fund?
So controlling ownership means 15, 25, 10.
Okay.
Control on the other hand means the ability to decide where the fund is going to invest, divest from, the management of the day-to-day affairs, whom should I market the fund, which LP, which jurisdiction. So frankly, in all senses, a fund manager is the one who's controlling it. Now suddenly if you come out with a rule which says NRIs are no longer eligible to discharge that role, NRIs or entities owned by NRIs can no longer manage a fund, then literally you are relegating them to advisors, things which
Even
are...
if they're not crossing the economic threshold.
Correct.
Okay. But because they still exercise control.
Absolutely.
But SEBI is saying that essentially whatever restructuring has been done, it is more to align SEBI regulations with PMLA regulations. And if we see, government is also bringing this beneficial ownership thing into even last week. I think they have asked the companies to also mandatorily disclose who is the beneficial. So, do you think there is much SEBI can do in this aspect, or it's government of India?
Disclosure is not a problem.
Disclosure is, first of all, the myth that is there that people are not willing to disclose, at least managers, NRIs are not willing to cooperate on disclosure. That is a wrong thing. The way in which it is defined, no, that is what is causing a lot of confusion. And therefore, we are saying, first let us know the objective for which we are doing. So those questions also she will read out.
Let me read those to you.
But once you give those responses, then we can also cooperate. No? But this is one absolute no ambiguity on the stand of AMRI that disclosure of true beneficial ownership information that is available with them or it is under their ability to get it, no problem. But if the law does not allow it to, like privacy and those kind of things, those one has to be really careful. Otherwise, you can't even mobilize, you will violate other countries.
But you can't restrict them from managing.
Otherwise, there is no problem.
And on PMLA doesn't ban NRIs from investing. PMLA is only about KYC. That even the ministry has clarified that. Okay, let me read some of the questions we've asked. So one is, what is the objective of the circular? Was it issued to clarify the KYC requirements for FPIs or to ban NRIs and resident Indians from operating FPIs? So this basically hits it on the head. Did you actually mean to ban? Okay. Second, what is the rationale of discriminating against PIOs and OCIs who are foreign nationals versus other foreign nationals who have no connection to India? Right? So one thing is, world over, the asset management industry, whether in China or whatever, has been started and managed by the Chinese nationals or Chinese foreign nationals, but people of Chinese origin, right? In India, it's the same thing. So what is this discrimination about? Do we expect foreigners to go and market and create Indian funds? I mean, this is how ridiculous this is. What is the rationale of discriminating against NRIs and resident Indians managing FPI investments against other foreign managers? which is similar. What was the PMLA Act of framework? Why was it chosen to restrict investments by NRIs and impose a blanket ban, which is something we've discussed? Um, yeah. While delegating the discretion to foreign banks and custodians to identify a jurisdiction as high risk, which has serious regulatory consequences, what responsibility and accountability is cast on them if they wrongly or inappropriately classify a country as a high risk jurisdiction? This
Question here
is a big
is
one.
as follows. High risk jurisdiction is an expression used in that circular. Fair enough. But who defines that is left to the bank. Some banks have considered some jurisdiction as high risk, some have not. Okay. Some banks have, or many banks have classified India as high risk jurisdiction. Does it mean India should not receive at all the investment? So do we accept that position? So the consequence of this provision, delegating, you cannot, it's a regulatory authority, SEBI or otherwise. You cannot delegate a regulatory discretion to a private sector bank. Okay, because it has implication to say that okay, if you classify as high risk, then you cannot invest in India. Somebody will say Singapore is the high risk jurisdiction, somebody will say Mauritius is high risk jurisdiction, somebody will say something else. That means by classification by bank of a jurisdiction as high risk jurisdiction automatically debars that jurisdiction for investing in India. So that regulatory discretion is excessive delegation or inappropriate delegation to the private sector. So you cannot do it. That is what we are saying now.
So, what was the rationale for treating senior managing officials acting in their fiduciary capacity as beneficial owners of FPIs? This is completely out there. What was the rationale for changing the rule for clubbing of investment limit from the earlier position of economic ownership of 50+% to beneficial ownership, which could mean economic ownership of 25, 15, and 10? Again, here it's very ambiguous. So we don't know if the earlier position of 50% stands or if the revised economic ownership positions of 25, 15, and 10 stand. And then what is the intent behind clubbing of investment limits by SMOs who are mere fiduciaries? And then lastly, how does the circular align the government's objective to promote the domestic fund management industry and provide them with a safe harbor under Section 9A of the Income Tax Act? Now, this one's really interesting because 3 years ago, the finance minister in his budget specifically spelled out with great enthusiasm, saying that we want to encourage the domestic fund management industry and we have outsourced it. We've sent it to Singapore, we've sent it to Dubai, we've sent it to Hong Kong. We want to bring all those fund managers back to India. Now, so there was a Section 9A of the Income Tax Act which actually provides safe harbor for them to do that, for fund managers to come back. Interestingly, this circular goes against that. So there are too many issues here. And what we're asking the government and what we've asked SEBI to do is please consult with us. If your objective is to put an end to round tripping and so on, we'll help you with that. But this is not the way to do it. And that this thing should be scrapped summarily. There is no basis for it. And in fact, it is putting India in a very, very ugly light. And we don't need this at this time. With global uncertainty, with elections coming next year, this is really bad timing and this should be scrapped.
In fact, just to extend one more point which Nandita mentioned about, this Section 9A. And 2 years ago, government actively encouraged, let us bring fund management industry to India and globalize our fund management industry. I remember even at the pioneering days, we all endeavored in 91, nobody understood fund industry, correct? From there, we have matured fund industry. Now, not only we have done good job in India, but also on a global basis, now we can tap in. So, a few years ago, the finance minister and also the government encouraged Indian resident institutions, approved them for managing fund from, now they have raised Money is they have put their face in front of the global marketplace. Okay, stick their neck out, spend enormous amount of money in putting together the structure. It is not cheap when you go global. They are very expensive. They put the whole thing. Now you are bringing existential crisis to this fund managers from India. They are just in the beginning of the whole thing. What impression we are giving out? I think that's the main challenge. And there are two more questions I think you have. Of course, we will share with them.
Yeah. Basically, how does this move help promote the Indian fund management industry? The current circular puts resident institutions at a disadvantage versus foreign portfolio managers. Does the regulator want to create an unequal playing field and export the entire fund management business from India to other jurisdictions? And then lastly, has the government, regulator, or finance ministry understood the implication of these structures unwinding, which could accentuate a stock market crash and a currency collapse?
So, idea is that first of all, for a proper, intelligent conversation, you also need to understand other side perspectives. So we say that let us understand what government wants to do. That is why we have posed these questions. They should come out clearly on all these questions. So these are the reasons why we have done this. Then we have more appropriate way to discuss and logically discuss. Otherwise, we will speculate. Government wants this, and government thinks that we are. Our thinking is that we don't want to disclose, and the whole atmosphere. We do not want any acrimonious situation. We do not want any market to tumble and dollars. So already we have been seeing those kind of things. There could be 10 different views where dollar is sliding one way or the other, but this could be one of the issues as well. And the whole idea is to promote a healthy discussion and address the problem rather than just people. That's the thing. You had a
We
question.
managed to get a hearing and probably convey even a fraction of this message in North Block so far. And secondly, given that the principles on which the circular seems to be based is highly discriminatory, couldn't you approach, say, the appellate tribunal to state's application?
So, on the first question, yes, we started in the ministry and we've had several engagements with the ministry. And I'm pretty hopeful that as we raise the awareness of this issue publicly, and you're all going to help us do this, that we'll get the attention at the highest level. I mean, I personally think that the way the Prime Minister has gone out and reached out to the Indian diaspora, he should be, and his office should be paying attention to this. And your second question was?
Whether you look at approaching the SAP in case
Yeah, so we don't want to go that route. You know,
And this is not something appealable. It's a circular.
Yeah.
So,
Nalapa, you refer to elections. Like you just said, we're all aware of how important the NRI and persons of Indian origin category is for the current government, at least politically speaking. So it looks a little ironic because don't you think that they would have had some empirical evidence based on which maybe they found some bad fish because of which they were forced to take this step?
That would be hugely speculative for me to say that, but honestly, I have not come across, or no one has cited a single example of a bad actor to me. And I have been engaging with the government for 3 months now. Not at SEBI and not at the finance ministry. I haven't heard a single case.
And if you have one black sheep, assume for a moment, I think this is exactly our problem. We have knee-jerk reaction. That whole community you brand as facilitating some money laundering, which is what exactly I think NRIs are feeling. But maybe we do not know. Nobody has told us whether a single case of NRIs facilitating this. Okay, if it has happened, of course, no doubt, go whole hog after that. But you cannot completely stop the route, and you encourage people to go from abroad and from India to abroad. I think it is a great opportunity. Today, India has huge ability to what I would call develop its financial services industry. Excellent talent, you know.
But sir, there are a lot of big conglomerate finance guys, finance companies in India. They're saying that we'll simply shut down these structures.
Well, it is.
That has repercussions, no?
Yeah.
If you shut down a structure, that means what? You're going to unwind.
Yeah.
Won't that have a reaction?
So they are
And
saying
is that a
I'm
good
talking about
thing?
lot of these big guys who have so many other businesses apart from running the structure. They are saying that okay, okay, if daddy got said no, we'll just kind of not do it.
That is a bit too general because people who are experts and who are professionals, it is their sole bread and butter.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody may have done it for diversification. They may not have position on a global marketplace. But today, what I honestly feel is that our financial services sector has done a great job in branding itself overseas. You look at Inam, you look at Edelweiss, you got Kotak, you got other people, do they not have a good brand globally? Do we need to enhance that or do we want to just say that we are inappropriate to manage? That is the question. So somebody may have done it for the fashion or somebody has done it because everybody is in financial services sector. Uh, I think one can take a view, okay, somebody say I will close down because in my total group revenue, this doesn't contribute much. Forget about this, right? But there are people who are professionals, and that exactly is my. Today, I remember even country like Singapore or Mauritius, right? In 1990s, early 1990s, there was no financial services professional. When we talked about fund in India in 1990s, when pioneering, most people thought we are talking about some plantation fund or golden and whatever, those timber and everything that was going on. So even the credibility was not there. Now you talk of fund manager is slightly different. Everybody wants to be in fund industry. And alternate market, this FPI market, that have become bigger than the normal market, financial market. Very institutionalized. They can take positions unlike individual investors. So, the cloud has gone up, it improves the whole. So 10% is a contribution of these economies only from financial service sector. Look at, I do not know what is the contribution of financial service sector in India, but I think we can take it to a very next level. And just that we have to at least there has to be some element of trust, no? There will always be something going wrong somewhere. There will be always road bumps, but you don't stop driving a car. I think that's a simple thing. And again, just to repeat once again, absolutely no objection to disclosure of true beneficial ownership. But beneficial ownership has to be defined as real ownership, not consider control as a beneficial owner and somebody else as a manager, uh, senior management official, again as then you distort the whole ecosystem. And it is not in sync with global marketplace.
So just one or two questions. One is that this figure of 75 million out of 450 billion, sorry, 75 billion out of 450 billion. These statistics are what from the
We got it to
depositories?
Economic Times in the news
No,
item.
this is part of the release and
Somewhere
the
they have
invite
got-
that we got
so we-
from the
The
organization.
data it can be collated from different sources, but it roughly comes to the same.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Who goes and markets India to start with? I think Indians. Whether it's managed by anybody else, but they go and tell India's story. We all have.
And the association also has resident Indian managers as members, right?
Yes.
So out of this, the 75 billion that is being spoken of, that is strictly OCIs, PIOs, NRIs, or that includes resident Indian
Yes,
managers?
Includes risk.
What would be the breakup there, roughly?
Half and half.
It is significant. We do not, honestly, we don't know the
Substantial.
number.
But one thing I want to point out,
NSDL is the source. You can get these numbers from NSDL.
Yeah,
is that we want to bat.
Yeah.
No, the article was from actually from
We want to bat for the entire industry. Okay, I'm not batting for myself, which is why I've put this group together, and we're all a bunch of like-minded professionals. We've been working all our lives for the growth of investments in this country, and we feel very passionately about it. I hope that's coming through, and we're standing together.
You will little louder if it just.
One of the points you've mentioned in your letter to the chairman, you've said about high-risk jurisdiction. I thought it was addressed when the Mauritius delegation met with the SEBI team. They had put out a statement saying that it's been put on hold and we've been given to understand. Why have you again raised it up?
Because the circular as it is exists today, there will be no amendment made to whatever may be grapevine, etc., being talked about, so far as the world is concerned, circular stands today. Only thing that has happened, the date has changed. So if SEBI has intention of continuing with higher risk jurisdiction and continuing with the same language, uh, whether the bank will do it or not.
True, but
So
custodians were supposed to draw up the list. Now that's been put on hold. So unless you don't have a list, how do you proceed with that?
no, therefore, what we are trying to say, if you assume they would not say they will not continue with the old, it's all oral talk. So if they are going to continue with high risk jurisdiction, 2 points have to be noted. One, are you going to delegate to custodian? Then the question of delegated authority arises to the private sector, no problem on that. But that also results in regulatory restriction on the investment. So one thing is to define high risk. Second thing is automatically lead. So private sector is made entitled to restrict foreign investment in India. You understand that? So delegation is not appropriate. That's what we are saying. And number two, that as was discussion with Mauritius and other SEBI said that we have not done anything. Is so whatever it is. Now even Mauritius, for example, take, a single case of money laundering has come up. And if what has been done by Mauritius, that's another question, right? There are two, three things about Mauritius. One is that Mauritius has a framework for money laundering, which is a par with. In fact, it is an associate member of FATF also, Financial Task Force. Okay, so it may not be member because a financial task force means what? There is a whole community of the countries out of which some members have taken a lead to say let us have more transparent regime everywhere. So it doesn't mean that those who are not members of task force are not good jurisdiction. Number one. Number two, insofar as Mauritius is concerned, Mauritius has good tax treaty. Now it has been revised, so tax benefits are gone. Number one, like it is like any other jurisdiction. Number two, that Mauritius has also allowed Indian tax officials to be positioned in Mauritius. Very few jurisdictions will do that. So Indian government has an ability to make sure that they are there. Third is when you take high risk jurisdiction, do you really mean high risk jurisdiction? What do you mean by high risk? High risk jurisdiction means the jurisdiction where there is no framework to deal with anti-money laundering or money laundering. Correct? If a the jurisdiction doesn't have a framework. Now those jurisdictions we have framework, but the banks are not following. That banks have to be considered high risk banks. Why do you call a jurisdiction? So that bank has to be taken to task for not following the anti-money laundering. So the whole nomenclature, high risk jurisdiction, classifying all countries. Okay, I understand that you must define high risk jurisdiction as the jurisdiction which doesn't have in place a regulation to deal with anti-money laundering or the machinery for that purpose. But if any actor, the bank or anyone else, asset manager, he violates those, then he has to be taken task. So those banks or the managers should be regarded as high risk bankers or high risk managers. Not high risk risk. It's a very broad brush. What kind of India has all the rules? We are still considered high risk jurisdiction. So does it mean we should not get any investment in India to start with? So I think that whole premise will have to go. We understand the FATF thing is coming up. Again, we'll have to look at what these are all grapevine we hear, but we can't comment on that. But simple answer to that is that it also includes African countries which are associate members. So how do you look at associate member? They are discriminated against the FATF. Task forces, few people in a group are identified that you go ahead and do the work. So it will also create a lot of confusion. So we are not trying to straight away question everything. We want the answers to the questions that we have raised. If you reply those questions, we can in a much better logical manner address them, and we want to cooperate with government. That's the bottom line.
What is the sense you're getting from the finance ministry? I understand that you'll have approached SEBI or whatever, but I think the ministry's view is very crucial here.
The press should know better. No, we have no intelligence.
You all said you all met the finance ministry, but what are they saying?
Initially, their views were very clear. and they understood that they didn't want to disrupt the industry. And so we're waiting to find out if there's been a change in that view, but that's all.
In your interaction with the SEBI chairman, have you requested for AMRI to perhaps be, or a representative of AMRI to perhaps be included in the HR panel?
Yes.
Because you're saying that there is no asset manager board.
Yes.
So what is the response?
He's asked us to speak in front of
Give
the
us a
committee.
letter so that
Oh.
Yeah.
they'll look into that. Obviously, cannot come in,
Yeah.
and rightly so. Straight away.
Thank you.
Anything else? So those,
Hi, so if there are no further questions.
yeah, so I think there are
Alright,
some.
we'll be rolling with refreshments. In case anybody wants the press release, those are here with me. Also, any other additional material that you would want, we have kits ready. Those are in the
The
bags.
letter, and everybody has a letter, no?
Yes,
You want
those
a hard
are
copy.
in the bags that are around you. We've placed them. So in case anybody wants any additional material, please feel free to let
That's
us know.
it.
Okay, we'll be rolling
Those
the
three
refreshments
questions
now.
also. Three questions.